YouTube, how's it going? The GOAT House is back with plain and simple, the best and most accurate power rankings there are around the NFL. And we're here just before week 14 of the NFL. It's crunch time, the end of the season. Can't believe we're already here. We'll have predictions for this week, just like every week coming up this week here on the channel. Plenty of content. Some interesting movement in this week's power rankings. We're going to break it all down in just a second. Extra content on the Patreon. You support us and get all that bonus content. Playoff predictions, score predictions, mock drafts, plenty more. All of that part of one package deal and updated every single week. It already feels like it's NFL draft season for most fan bases, so really enjoy updating those mock drafts. So check it out. Link in the description, patreon.com/thegoathouse. 40K, that's our subscriber goal. 2020 is almost here. We're not quite to 40K, so please help us out by subscribing if you're new to the channel. We got all kinds of NFL and college football action, even in the offseason, full free agency and NFL draft coverage. We started this channel off the NFL draft, so we got you, even in the offseason. Click that like button. Check us out on Twitter. Really would appreciate all that. To the power rankings. Going to break it all down. Just a heads up, if you can't focus on one team and why they moved up and down, it's a moving puzzle. 32-piece puzzles, I like to call it. Teams moving around could affect other teams and where they are. Head-to-head matters a little bit to me. It doesn't all matter 100% because you're not comparing two teams here. You're comparing 32 teams. We'll break it all down here. These aren't predictions, by the way. Some people, for some reason, think they're predictions. They're just Week 14 power rankings. But number 32, we got a new number 32. It's the New York Giants. They're on an 8-game losing streak. Looked like a disaster. Daniel Jones wasn't helping them against the Packers this week. They were in the snow. They really can't get much of anything going. And it's unfortunate. So they're down a spot with the Bengals winning, and they looked pretty impressive doing so. Yeah, they still have less wins than the Giants, but the 8-game losing streak, talking about power rankings, a week-to-week basis here, definitely thought the Giants were deserving of moving down to 32, while the Bengals were deserving of moving down or up to 31. Moving down a whopping 6 spots is the Jacksonville Jaguars. They, based off the last few weeks, they look like the worst team in football. Very little effort, a lot of giving up. Plain and simple, it's a disaster over there. So, they shouldn't be the number 30th team, based on who they got. They do have some holes now, but, man, probably the more disappointing teams at this stage of the year looking at the last few weeks. So they're down to 30. It's odd seeing them down there, but that's where they belong. Down 2 spots, the Cardinals. They're on a losing streak, but they've actually looked pretty good while being on that losing streak up until last week against the Rams. It was a disaster. Bad game for Murray. I know he was playing injured, but still down 2 spots. They're on a losing streak. I still think they got a bright future, though. Lions going to keep moving down as expected, with Stafford out. The defense looked good early in the year, and it's really fallen apart. They had that game against the Bears. I thought they outplayed them for most of the game, but couldn't quite get it done in crunch time. Very disappointing season for the Lions. There was a lot of high hopes, and there's a legitimate excuse with Stafford being out, though. But there was a lot of hype around that D-line, and it's really not even close to living up to the hype. So that's very disappointing, on that stage. Moving up three spots, the Miami Dolphins, they looked like a good football team, mainly offensively against the Philadelphia Eagles. So they're up 3 spots. This team, they got loads of draft picks. If they do this thing right, I like Brian Flores as a coach. They do this thing right. It's a team of the future, as they should be, but still got a ways to go. Another team, the Redskins. At one point, we were talking about maybe the Redskins versus the Dolphins for the number 1 pick. That was the Tank Bowl early in the season, and now they're both up 3 spots. The Redskins win back-to-back games, beating the Lions, and then surprisingly beating the Panthers. And they look, the Lions game, they looked a little sloppy, but they still won. The Panthers game, they look pretty darn good, and they won the game, so that's a good thing. The Falcons coming in at 25, another sloppy team, a lot of mistakes, but they're still better, honestly. They could beat head-to-head some teams that are above them here in the power rankings, but just based on the way they've been playing, how the season's been going, they're down at 25, but I didn't really see any room to move down. They had a whole bunch of mistakes in the Saints game, and they still were in that game. So I guess that's kind of the bright spot, but how they can't finish the games is, I guess the bad spot, the bad situation, and how they start games, I should say. Down 2 spots is the Jets. We're going to start to see a bunch of teams that based on, their performance alone, the Jets would be an example. It almost feels like they should plummet. They really should fall But there are so many teams that did that where each team won't really fall that much. It's a little weird, but that's how, my system works here. The Jets losing to the Bengals, you think they would fall big time, but other teams also falling. And could you really move them below the teams like the Falcons, the Redskins, the Dolphins, and you got teams falling like the Lions, Cardinals, the Jags, the Giants, based on their performance, you wish you could move them. I'm going to say this about a lot of teams too. You wish you could move them down more than 2, but you really can't here. The Chargers losing to the Broncos, down 3 spots, I think is enough for them. You can't really move them below some of these other teams. The Chargers, I think in total on the year, people could argue the Falcons, maybe the Eagles. I'd say the Chargers are the most disappointing team. I mean, that team's got talent everywhere. Quarterback play's been mediocre. Offensive line play's been definitely below average. Everywhere else, I think it's a really good team. So it's very disappointing. It's some coaches that will be on the hot seat, I think. Even though it was a good season last year. So it's interesting. So they're down 3 spots. The Broncos are up 6 spots. A lot of these teams losing. A lot of these teams very, very disappointing, needing to move down, which helps the Broncos move up. They look like a new team, possibly, with Drew Lock. That's a good defense they played. They executed down the stretch. I like the play calling for the most part. You usually don't. They're up 6 spots. It's a team that definitely could have a lot more wins. A lot more wins than they have. Looking at a lot of those games. A recent one against the Vikings. Remember the one against the Bears I thought they had. There's more games we could talk about. So, that team's close to being very tough schedule they had. And it seems very close to being in the hunt, for that 6th seed. But unfortunately, they're not. Down 4 spots, the Raiders. Based on what the Raiders have been doing, I want to move them down more. They moved down 7 spots last week, though. 4 spots this week. It's just you can't. I couldn't feel like I didn't feel like I could, move them down below some of these other teams, even though they're a very disappointing team. They're heading south. They're heading in the wrong direction. Teams are starting to figure them out, and it's pretty easy competition at this point. That's what it looks like. And this is the one, based on how they played, who they lost to, you wish you could move the Eagles down more. Based on what they did, wish you could make them plummet here. They almost deserve to be, but when it's all said and done, look at teams around them. Could you really move them below the Raiders? Can you really put the Broncos ahead of them, the Chargers ahead of them, the Jets ahead of them? You can't. So, you may question why the Eagles moved down 1 spot based on what they did. It's not just about based on what they did. It's just how it's a puzzle. It's just how it all molds together there. So they're only down 1 spot to number 20, but it doesn't show how disappointing of a season the Eagles are having. And they got some work to do in the offseason, that is for sure. Down 5 spots is the Browns. Yeah, moving down 5 is a bit. I can't punish them anymore, though, because I feel like if Baker didn't get hurt in that game, I know he came back in, but I think they could have won that game. It looked like they had it. Hated the play calling. Obviously, the offensive line play was rough. The Steelers were very good in the front 7, like usual. But the Browns are down 5 spots there. Down 3 spots is the Panthers. Very disappointing loss to the Redskins. Very, very disappointing loss to the Redskins. So once again, it comes up, based on what they did alone. You would think a bigger number than 3 in a negative way would be next to the Panthers. But you just look at these teams right next to them. The Browns, the Eagles, the Raiders. I guess those teams kind of helped each other out from not moving down even more. Up 6 spots. So finally, we're going to talk about a team that's heading in the right direction. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They just won back-to-back games. Very impressive. They took down the Jags, who were one of the more disappointing teams in football. A well-executed game for the Bucs these last 2 weeks. And they're up 6 spots. Another team that, I think could be better than the record shows. They had some tough losses. They're just inconsistent. But now we're starting to see some consistency here. So they're up 6 spots. Up 5 spots is the Chicago Bears. They're on a 2-game winning streak. It is tough having them move up 5 spots, which I consider a lot. Squeaking by the Giants and squeaking by the Lions with their 3rd-string quarterback. So if you look at it that way, it's tough. But they're on a 2-game winning streak. They're gaining some energy and some momentum. See all those teams moving, down. Panthers, Browns, Eagles, Raiders. I think you get the situation there. So the Bears definitely deserving of moving up 5 spots here. Down 3 spots is the Colts. Disappointing season for them. A game against the Titans, which I thought the Titans were the better team, but I thought the game could have gone either way. And then looking within the game, thought the Colts had that game won possibly, and then it just, it just went totally the wrong way there. Just a big swing within the game. this team just doesn't have enough right now. They just don't have enough on either side of the ball. You got big time players like Darius Leonard, but I mean, there's just not and they got solid players everywhere, solid young players, just not enough, and that's kind of what's causing the losing streak here. And I like the coaching staff. I like Frank Reich, but it's been a little disappointing, honestly, recently. So they're down to 15. It's been disappointing big time. So only down 3 spots. Maybe it doesn't show how disappointing it's been, but you really can't move them any further down looking at the other teams. Same goes for the Cowboys, down 2 spots. Based on the way they're playing, the disappointment, you probably expected down more than 2. But again, I'm going to repeat myself a lot. Can you really move them below some of these other teams? Could you really do it? In my opinion, in my system here, I could not. Maybe you can argue the Colts ahead of them. But I think people are ripping the Cowboys a little too much. At the end of the day, they're losing. They're disappointing. They have a good team. Yeah, they deserve a little bashing. But I think people are getting a little extreme here. They're calling them like a bad team. In no way are the Cowboys a bad team. They lost close games to the Vikings, the Patriots, and then they got beat up pretty good by the Bills. But those are 3 good teams there. And because they can't beat the good teams in the interesting games, the close games, doesn't mean they're a bad team. So I think people are getting a little carried away, maybe, but they definitely deserve a little bashing here. A must-win against the Bears. It's a must-win for the Bears as well. So 14 versus 16 on Thursday night should be interesting, but honestly, we can start ripping the Cowboys completely. I'll be on board with that if the Cowboys lose this one, even though it's a primetime game in Chicago. 13, up 5 spots to Steelers. I love this defense. Mike Tomlin is a hell of a coach, always has his guys balling out. Love the front 7, TJ Watt. Bud Dupree's having a career year, his contract year too. And they've drafted very well on the defensive side, picked up the right guys on the defensive side, traded for the right guys on the defensive side, so it's very impressive. That's what's winning games. Duck Hodges steps up. They have their injuries, too, in terms of their weapons, running back, receiver. So it's impressive they're able to pull that off, and they're able to remain in the playoffs right now for the AFC. So up 5 spots, well-deserving the Steelers at number 13. Number 12, up 4 spots, is the Rams, and this is kind of where the head-to-head comes into play. I know the Steelers beat the Rams, but looking at how they play against the field, kind of going forward, just my thoughts. I think I still like the Rams ahead of them. The Rams and I know they played the Cardinals. They may have figured some things out. They did something they have not been able to do all season. I liked what I saw. It's time to kick it into gear. That's kind of what it looked like. They got a big game against the Seahawks this week. I still like this Rams team. I do think there are. When it's all said and done, looking at the 6 teams in the playoffs right now for the NFC, I still think those teams are definitely better when it's all said and done. But the Rams are definitely a sneaky team. They're up 4 spots. Remaining at 11, it's tough to keep them at 11, but if you look at the top 10 teams, there's a clear top 10 teams. Those 10 teams really separate themselves. But the Tennessee Titans are on fire right now. I love this team. We see why I picked them to win the division to start the year, even though the Texans are ahead of them still. It's a solid team, and they find ways to win in crucial games, and they got a tough schedule ahead. We'll see if they can keep executing. It's tough to go against this team right now, but they remain at number 11. Yeah, winning that big game. Definitely they deserve some credit. It's just tough. You can't really move them ahead of the clear top 10. To me, there's a clear top 10 right now. The Titans 100% easily can get into that top 10. They can be part of that top 10, if they continue to do what they're doing, which I think is very, very possible. I like the way this team's playing. So the top 10, here we go. Number 10 coming off the loss is the Vikings. They're down 4 spots. It's tough. It's tough moving them down 4 spots because when you're talking about a top 10 team, 4 spots is a lot. They are coming off a loss, while a lot of these teams are coming off impressive games. So it is tough to move them down 4 spots, though, because you look at the circumstances of the game. They're in Seattle on prime time. No Adam Thielen. That was kind of glaring in the game. Your star running back goes down. Riley Reif, their left tackle, goes down very early. Just everything went against them. Everything went the wrong way in that game. And it's kind of a good thing at the end of the day that they were actually in that game. They were actually putting up a fight. In the end there, with everything going the wrong way, it kind of shows the talent they have on this team, even without a lot of good talent in the game. So I still think this is a very good football team. Defense has been a little disappointing. The run defense was very disappointing in that game. That's something that's kind of been a good thing. Looking at the Cowboys game, for an example, the pass defense has been the problem, but A little bit of both, no, a lot of both, honestly, mainly the run game. Disappointing in that game. So they're down 4 spots. Like I said, there's a clear top 10. They're at the bottom of that 10 for now, but it's a real good top 10 teams here. I'm going to move the Patriots down to number 9, down 5 spots. They may have a better record than some of these other teams, but they are not playing like it. At this point, we really got identities on teams. The 8 teams ahead of them, no doubt, are better right now. Will they be better in the playoffs? That's a different discussion. That's a different debate. These are not predictions. Patriots are down 5 spots, and people rip the Patriots early on. And those people will say, they'll tell everybody that we're rooting for the Patriots or on the Patriots side that I told you so. But early in the year, those people that were ripping them because they didn't play anybody. And I don't think that's really fair. I mean, you can say, yeah, the Patriots need to prove something to me still, but they haven't beat anybody, but they were still winning. To me, you couldn't rip them at that point. But now that they play, a good team in the Texans, and they get dominated. Now you can rip them a little bit because they played a good team and they could not execute against them. So now I understand the ripping a little bit. And then we thought maybe the Eagles and the Cowboys were good wins for them, but now looking at what those two teams are doing, not so much, especially the Eagles one, not so much. So the Patriots worry me a little bit. Tom's off his game. The offensive line's way off their game. The play calling's off their game. The defense, I've been saying for weeks, yes, statistically the number 1. I think they have the best secondary in football, but I don't think they're actually the best defense, and we kind of see that kind of showing up, but still a top-tier defense. We're on to number 8. A big win for this team, but could not find room to move them up. It's the Chiefs. Even though there was a dominant win, the Raiders are a disaster right now, and there was a little bit of sloppy play on the offensive side. They were everything seemed to go the Chiefs' way. When it's all said and done at the end of the year in the playoffs, if healthy, and the Chiefs are better than number 8. But again, not predictions right now. Very impressive win. They're on the right track. It's just other teams I have to keep in the top 7, or have to move or keep in the top 7. So that's why they are at number 8. But I think very highly of the Chiefs. This is where it gets real tough. Number 7, I got the Texans. They're up 2 spots. 2 is a lot within the top 10, especially within the top 7 here. Very, very impressive win against the Patriots. I want to see them stay consistent now. The Colts game, they did win. I thought it was a very sloppy game for both teams. I thought it was a very sloppy game for the Texans. So this was kind of the win that made just this one alone. The Patriots game made them move up 2 spots. I love their defensive game plan, love their defensive execution in that Patriots game. The offense did their job as well against a pretty good defense. Very impressed with this team, but more of the takeaway from the last 2 games have been disappointment from the opposing side, the Colts and the Patriots, but I am impressed with the Texans. They're on their way up. It's a team that it feels like it's one of those teams, and I kind of say this about my own team too, the Vikings. It's one of those teams that could beat anybody. They can be the best team in football, but they also at any given time could slip up and lose to about anybody. That's kind of how I feel about the Texans, even though they haven't showed a lot of that. But I think it's a very good team. Who I'm impressed with the most on this team, well, I'm impressed with some pieces on the defense because some guys that aren't supposed to be anything that crazy good, they're stepping up, throughout that defense. But what I'm impressed with is the coaching staff that I've doubted. Going into the year, I didn't really doubt Romeo Crennel and his defense, but at the end of that Saints game, that was bad. At that point, I'm questioning how does this guy have a job because it was that bad. But it's one game and real good execution, really good game plan, really good defense with a limited amount of star talent with J.J. Watt being out. Super impressive. Bill O'Brien's really impressing me too, a guy that I have doubted too. And still, I don't want to put 100%. I'm pretty sure Texans fans are with me on this. You don't want to put 100% belief in him. But they're rolling right now. It's a scary, scary team. Love the weapons they have on offense. The defense too. I can't say enough. Guys like Bradley Roby, Lonnie Johnson, Reeder. You got. I already like the linebacker duo, but other guys that we don't expect a whole bunch from, producing at a pretty high level. Number 6 is going to be the Green Bay Packers. They move up 1 spot. They take care of the Giants as expected. They move up a spot just because other teams moving down. No room to really move them up a whole bunch, in my opinion. The Niners and the Chargers loss hurt a little bit still, but still a very good team. It's a team at any given time, that they could struggle on offense, but they also can be elite on offense. And the same thing goes for defense. Anytime they can let the team push down the field, but they can make that big play. They have that playmaking ability, but I love the pass rush. Anytime they can win a game purely off their pass rush with the Smith guys and company. So the Packers, into the top 6 now. They are up 1 spot. A team that I am beyond impressed with is the Buffalo Bills. They're going to move up 5 spots. A lot of spots to move up here when we're talking about the top 10 teams in football. 5 spots, and I am very impressed with this team. And it's everywhere. I'm impressed everywhere with this team. And you could say, I know people will say it, the Bills, they move up 5 spots for beating the disappointing Cowboys. It's really not who they beat. It's what I see on the field. Execution on the field, regardless who you play, definitely matters to me a lot. And man, I love what I saw. And we look at the Bills. I've said it for weeks now. I've doubted the Bills at times, but I've said this for weeks. Early in the year, they were making games close because they were winning because their defense was playing very well. The offense, Josh Allen was giving the ball away, and that would make games close. And then moving on throughout the next weeks, they turned Josh Allen into a game manager. That's just not him. That's not his nature. And they just didn't have enough offense to win some of these other games, like the Eagles, like the Browns. Now they split the difference. They figured it out. The improvement from Josh Allen is absurd. Absurd. The play calling, phenomenal. The defense, guys like Ed Oliver, a little quiet rookie season, he's starting to pick it up. They got a great rotation on the D-line. They have a great secondary. I love the way this team's executing. You look at the last time they played the Patriots, what happened in that game? They played a very good defensive game. Josh Allen kind of gave that one away. They were still in the game with the mistakes they were making. The difference from Josh Allen then and now, it's not even the same guy. It's not even the same guy. The difference in the play calling and the identity of them knowing their identity on that offensive side is not even the same. It's a whole different Buffalo Bills team. They could slip up at any time. It's possible, but I love what I see from this Buffalo Bills team. Definitely deserving of being number 5. 2, 3, and 4 is a tight battle. Let me just go ahead and reveal them. Let's go. We got the Saints at number 4. They're up 1 spot. We got the Niners at number 3. They're down 1 spot. And the Seahawks at number 1. They're up 1 spot. And then why not? Let's reveal the Ravens, the best team in football, hands down. They've been number 1. They're staying number 1. But let's discuss the 2, 3, 4. You could argue that any way. To me, I didn't want to make too many changes. We see teams like the Seahawks beat the Niners, the Saints beat the Seahawks. We see kind of a circle there, and it's tough. It was very tough moving down the Niners. They played the best team in football. They played a very good game. They could have won that game. You can't have any takeaways from that game except maybe one that the Niners struggled against, reading the ball on the read option, the RPO. That's really the only thing. But you can't have any big takeaways from that game. It was tough moving the Niners down 1 spot. But they're coming off a loss. The Seahawks are coming off a win against a pretty good Vikings team. The Seahawks do scare me a little bit. They do scare me a little bit. Even though, if you remember preseason, I predicted them to go to the NFC Championship game. If you've been along with our Patreon, I've been predicting them to go to the Super Bowl recently. Things will change. But they are scaring me a little bit because it continues to happen, though, and they continue to execute and win the game. But games where it seems like everything's kind of going their way down the stretch, everything's going their way, and they're a little scary. They're making everything a little too close. They should be a lot more comfortable. So that scares me long term. Can they do that through the playoffs? Can they do that? And I don't see why not, but it's a little scary at the same time. So they're up to 2 just because they're coming off a good win, and the Niners are coming off a loss because it is a week-by-week power ranking. But the Niners, the Packers win still means a lot, and that's why it was tough. And who do I think's better against the field? Niners, Seahawks? It would just be assumption. You could argue the Niners, I think. You could argue the Niners, but it's tough. Here in Week 14, just based on what just happened, kind of was the tiebreaker on top of the Seahawks beating the Niners, which doesn't mean a whole bunch because at any given time they can play again, the Niners can win, and it kind of matters what you do against the field, but it is tough. And the Saints at 4, I've had the Saints below the Seahawks and the Niners. I just didn't see enough to move them ahead of either one. I just didn't really get enough. The Saints, I think, were better earlier in the year. Still a very good team, still a legit contender. Halfway through the season, I predicted them to win the Super Bowl, actually. And I predict them to go to the Super Bowl in preseason, so I still think very highly of them. At times, a little sloppy, still executing, but just to split hairs here when we're talking about elite teams. So Saints at 4, Niners at 3, Seahawks at 2, no-brainer. The best offense in football, an improving defense. Baltimore Ravens at number 1, very impressive team, very, very impressive team. And they beat the number 2 team there in the Niners. So that is my rankings. Let me know your guys' thoughts. Would really appreciate to see your guys' rankings in the comments. Got our predictions coming late night, Tuesday night, like every week, with the fellows of the Goat House. Can't wait. Favorite video of the week. Score predictions every single Wednesday. Junior score predictions on the Patreon. Plenty more. Maybe we'll update my playoff predictions for everybody to see for YouTube this week. It's possible. A lot of college football content on the way, too. We had score predictions for the conference championship games, picks against the spread. Bowl games are coming. Very excited for that. So a lot of action here going on at the Goat House. Please check all that out. Stay tuned for more to come. Please subscribe. Click that like button. Really appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.